So today was changeover day. In the afternoon, we were to be flying south.
But before that, we were off to the Farallone ski village. Not for skiing, of course, but to enjoy the scenery and any wildlife we might find along the way. The road was tarmac all the way today, but the switchbacks started as we left the city and continued all the way to the resort. The lower slopes were covered in California poppies, accidentally brought here centuries ago, but thriving in a climate similar to that of their original home. Vegetation became more sparse as we ascended, and at one point we passed a group of cyclists masochistically labouring up at a snail's pace. When we reached the Farallones, there was some snow still on the ground, but it was South American spring, and it would soon disappear. It was here that we first heard, and then saw, silhouetted against a clear blue sky, a mountain caracara, a bird of prey rather like a falcon. Looking back the way we had come, it was amazing to look out over miles of mountain tops. Birds were generally scarce, but we did see a Chilean tinamou. Tinamous are an ancient New World order of birds, similar in appearance to quails and partridges. They have a limited capacity for flight, preferring to walk or run rather than fly from any danger. In that, they are closer to the flightless ostriches and rheas. Our afternoon flight took us to Puerto Montt, a city on the coast at the southern end of Chile's Lake District, and known as the gateway to the Andes and the Patagonian fjords. There were 2 stops in the flight to drop off and pick up passengers. With the country's length and narrowness, it seemed that planes were used rather like buses. Having arrived at Puerto Montt, and with a new minibus and driver, we set off for our accommodation in Puyehue National Park. The weather here was cool and showery, such a contrast to the warmth and sunshine we had experienced around Santiago. As it got dark, so we began to climb, the journey being completed along a very long and winding road. We had left the airport at 5:30 p.m. and arrived there just before 9, tired and rather hungry. Thank goodness for one of those 3-course meals. Our accommodation was the rustic lodge in the shadow of an extinct volcano. A roaring log fire was most welcome, as there was snow on the ground outside. It looked as if thermals were going to be the order of the day tomorrow. I could hear the rain lashing against the window pane when I awoke, but thankfully, by the time we had breakfasted, it had eased a little. We took a short drive before starting a cold and soggy morning. There were moss and lichen-bedecked trees and bamboo everywhere, but few birds. We did, however, see a flock of austral parakeets and a single white-throated tree runner. We, of course, have tree creepers in this country. Slightly different name, but the same modus operandi. As we proceeded down the trail, the rain got heavier and we got colder. We were hoping to see Magellanic woodpecker, one of the largest woodpecker species in the world, but were struggling. Eventually, we decided we needed an early lunch and the log fire. Coming out after, warmer and determined, we headed for a different area of the forest. Luckily, it was a little drier now. Even so, we were getting discouraged when suddenly, out of nowhere, they appeared. 2 males and a female. The females are all black, but the males have stunning bright red heads. It was a real adrenaline moment. Mission accomplished. Soon we were back in the bus and driving down through the bamboo forest to the park entrance. Here we were searching for another of those frustrating tapaculos, the black-throated twet-twet. We could hear 2 males calling to one another on either side of us. Their song is a low-pitched series of hoots, which speeds up and then slows down. They feed by scratching noisily at the ground with powerful feet, but being dark in colour and retiring in habit, they are almost impossible to see. And thus it proved for us. It then began to pour with rain, and we decided it was too wet for wet. So it was back to Puerto Montt to prepare for the next day and the ferry to Chiloé Island. Chiloé Island is a short distance from the mainland across the Chacao Channel. There is currently a bridge under construction that will link the two, but when I was there, it was a half-hour ferry ride from the small town of Pargua. While we waited, I counted 7 ferries plying back and forth, all full of vehicles of various shapes and sizes. On the trip across, we saw many seabirds, mostly cormorants, of which Chile has 5 species, and near the island itself, a flightless steamer duck. The flightless steamer duck is in the genus Techeires, which comes from the ancient Greek for fast rower. They are named steamer from their habit of slapping the water with their stubby wings when swimming, looking rather like a paddle steamer. The south of Chiloé Island is a wilderness of forest and swamps, but in the northeast, where we were visiting, it is a mosaic of rolling hills and fields. It was raining again, so much of the morning's birding was done from the comparative comfort of the bus. We were particularly hoping to see slender-billed parakeet, a close and rarer relative of the austral parakeets we had seen yesterday. We drove around through the mist until finally one was spotted through the gloom. Passing through the countryside, it was really interesting to see what we know as garden plants, such as Berberis darwinii and fuchsias, growing wild in the hedgerows. Lunch was taken in a restaurant overlooking a lake which held a number of handsome black-necked swans. We then returned to Puerto Montt in time to catch our afternoon flight south to Punta Arenas. We arrived in the dark to a cloudless sky and amazingly bright stars.
As it transpired, the rain of the last few days was the last we were to see on the trip.